Hi and welcome to this week's episode of The Pulse, Regen Strategic's policy and political podcast. We're delighted, Libby and I, to be joined by Donna Faragher, former member of the Legislative Council for the Liberal Party, a 2-decade tenure, almost half your life, which I'm sure we can unpack a little bit more over the next 30 minutes. You're Minister for Environment, Youth, Planning, Disability Services, a host, as you could imagine, with 2 decades in that place, a host of other parliamentary and shadow ministerial roles. You were the youngest Liberal Member of Parliament, or Liberal Member of the Legislative Council. I think the second youngest after Louise Pratt, if my research is correct. How are you stepping into post-parliamentary life?
Yeah, well, obviously it's a bit of an adjustment after 20 years. But, you know, I look back on those 20 years with such a high degree of gratitude. The privilege of being a Member of Parliament, even for a short period of time, is amazing. For me to have had that opportunity for 20 years is wonderful and an enormous privilege. So I am, obviously enjoying the next phase, and I think, people forget that I actually came in when I was 29. So the next phase is in front of me, but that time as a Member of Parliament has been a really special part of my life.
Yeah, and you were, I guess, a parliamentarian's parliamentarian in that you utilise the systems and the processes available to you, particularly in opposition, I think, quite effectively. Questions on notice and the due diligence and the research and background, petitions, correspondence. I
think the persistence too.
Yes.
Yeah. The persistence.
Yeah. Is that something that you always had a knack for? Did you pick that up and get good guidance along the way?
Yeah, I think you pick it up over a period of time. And I think the advantage, obviously, in opposition, you have very few resources. Yeah. So you have to learn how to use your resources most effectively. And when it comes to Parliament, you have, as you mentioned, things like questions on notice, question time. You have the use of petitions, committee work. Yeah. All of those are avenues for you to focus your attention and to use to gain information and then to advocate for change. Whatever it might be on an issue within your community, or it might be a much broader issue that affects everyone in WA in some way. So it does take time, I suppose, to hone those skills, and you watch and you learn from others as well. But I like to think that after 20 years, I became pretty strong in knowing what I needed to do to get an outcome and to utilising those things that were available, Yeah.
Any set or single achievement or reform that you're most fond of, looking back?
Yeah, look, I suppose as a minister, you have the opportunity to deliver on policies and initiatives that have significant impact. And, when I was Minister for Environment, we undertook a number of initiatives with respect to the Kimberley, environmental approvals reform, work around approvals for the Gardner gas extension, and a range of other things there. But equally, in opposition, and perhaps most recently, is my work in relation to children and access to services through the Child Development Services, which my advocacy was primarily done through opposition, through the very things that we've just talked about. And, we were able to push and push and push for funding to be provided, adequate funding to be provided, which the government finally did last year. There is a lot more work that needs to be done. But I think from my point of view, you have to use those tools to advocate the case for change. And I think certainly in relation to child development services, that's one particular area that I'm pleased that I played a strong part in pushing the government to provide some more funding.
And Donna, I think, would I be fair in saying that you found some allies on the other side of the chamber who assisted you with that, particularly other women?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think when you have issues that are important to people, and children absolutely is a key area of interest to, I would like to think, everybody. So you have people on both sides of the chamber who will have an interest and will be supportive of what you are seeking to achieve. And certainly I would also say that even though I was a member of the opposition pushing for these issues, I think that many members of the government knew that I was very genuine about it and actually wanted an outcome. Yeah. That's what I wanted. I wanted an outcome that would see more funding flow through to a critical service for children. So they understood where I was coming from, and it was coming from an intent to do good and to get a positive outcome.
Yeah. Are there, particularly within the work that you've been focused on with regard to the child development services that the state government is responsible for, are there, you mentioned funding, of course, but are there other longer term fixes and some structural reforms that you think need to be addressed as a priority?
Yeah, I do. And part of the advocacy that we did was I pushed for a parliamentary inquiry, which I was successful in gaining. And as part of that, it was a 2-year inquiry. Myself and 2 Labor members of Parliament were part of it. Yep. And we made over 50 recommendations for change. Some of them structural changes, yes. But other things in terms of how we can do things better, in terms of ensuring that the service is accessible and sustainable into the long term. So there are things that I think that we can do. Funding absolutely needs to be there, yep. But you can increase funding. The wait list for children accessing services will go down. But over a period of time, if you don't do anything else, the wait list will go back up again. So I've been a really strong advocate for greater support services in our schools. Yes. Allied health services in our schools, coming to where the students actually are. So speech pathology in schools, for example, access to individual supports. Because we have situations now where children may will be sitting on a wait list to see a speech pathologist for 9 months, 12 months. That's an entire year. Okay. In that period of time, that's an entire school year. But in that period of time, if you had access to some speech therapy and support, whether as an individual or as a group, classes or something like that, however they decide to work it, then at least some supports are being given. And from my point of view, that's a really important step. Now, some schools do provide it, but they have to pay for it out of their own budget. Yeah. I think it's something that should be universal. Yeah. So that's just one example. I think we should have more child and parent centres. I think the earlier we can identify where there might be some challenges for children, the earlier we can get intervention and support, the greater and better outcome it's going to be for those children.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because I think a lot of the times parents just don't know where to go. They don't know where to start. The system just seems, is too confronting for them. And so I think you're absolutely right. Parent and children centres make so much sense. And realistically, in the scheme of things, I don't think would be that expensive to fund.
They're not.
Yeah.
They're not.
Yeah.
They're not. And I think where you can have integrated services all in one place, health, education, community services, all in one place, surely that's going to be a good outcome for children and families, and particularly young children and families. When you're navigating the system, as you say, it's really hard.
It's a nightmare.
And you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes if you're able to come to services that are integrated, you then get access to individuals who know where to go.
That's right.
How to access services. So I think the more we have those sort of integrated services, children's services where families can come to and are easily accessible, then that's a good thing. And we have some child and parent centres that are located close to schools or on school grounds.
Yep.
They're really important. That's a great way for us to access families. I think there needs to be more of them.
Yeah.
And as test cases, are they working?
Absolutely.
In the way they're intended?
Yeah, they are. And thousands of families access these services right now. And there's been calls for a number of years from the community services sector, because whilst they are they're funded by government, but they're run by a non-government organisation. So Anglican, Agala, others. And so there has been consistent calls for more of them, and I would like to see more of them, because I do think, again, they have a really positive benefit, not only for the child but their family. And as I say, children don't have time to wait. We want children to have the best possible start, and if they have access to these services, which will then maybe help them navigate the system if they need it, or if then early identification can be seen for a child who might need some extra support or whatever it might be, then surely that's what we want.
But I think too, if you can identify some of these issues early on and deal with them then and there, some children don't need further assistance.
Correct.
So we're actually nipping those problems in the bud and actually saving on the much needed services later on for others.
And that's where I sit in relation to this issue, because you've obviously always got a spectrum of issues that, a child may have some, mild communication challenges. They might also have at the other extreme as well. But it might be just some opportunity to get some strategies in place to help in terms of communication and a range of other things for them and their families that might be of enormous benefit. But if you let it linger and continue, it can become worse.
Classic problems like speech problems actually being identified as hearing problems.
Correct.
Things like that really do need that early intervention.
Yeah, and if you're not hearing, you're not learning.
That's right.
And it's a
vicious cycle.
It's pretty simplistic in the way that I say that, but it's true.
Exactly.
If you're sitting in a classroom and you can't hear what the teacher's saying, your capacity to learn is severely diminished.
And it's often when we see behavioural diffiences as well.
Correct.
Having
So
been
it's
a former
this cycle.
chalky. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cycle.
You forgot about that, didn't you?
No. It was there. You've got a lived experience. Many facets of your career, Libby. Donna, you served in the West Australian Parliament, I guess across an era in terms of the way in which politicians and elected members communicate. You started, maybe Twitter was just becoming a thing, but certainly no public profiles. It was then, well, it doesn't exist anymore. It's now changed to X, and I think most politicians are running a million miles from it. They're on newer, more integrated mainstream platforms to communicate their message. That must feel a long way away from, say, 2005, 2006, or coming into government under Barnett.
Yeah. Absolutely. When I came in 2005, we didn't use Facebook. We didn't. Our media and our ability to communicate was mainly through, obviously, the major papers and TV, but also your local newspapers, which were always delivered, and that was a big thing. That's why we did a lot of our communication, and through newsletters and other things that we would do. It's changed immensely. When I first came in, a lot of the correspondence that I would have was actually in letter form. People would write to us with letters.
Yes.
That very rarely happens now. So to see the change over a period of time has been quite amazing. It does mean it's very much 24/7, and I think that the challenge is actually getting to be able to communicate effectively and for people to be listening, because there's so much that people can be listening to and reading and hearing about 24/7. It's actually being able to cut through all of that. And that's an interesting challenge for members of Parliament nowadays too.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So you also came in at a time where I think women weren't necessarily there weren't as many women in Parliament as there are now, and you were certainly young. And I think when in reading your valedictory speech, I think that I could say, and I think you'll back me up here, that you dealt with sexism and that you dealt with ageism, but ageism not the way I have to deal with ageism now that I'm getting old, but the way that, being young. And so you're inexperienced. What did you know? Young buck coming in, and I think that a lot of younger people, not just in Parliament, but going into the workforce, experience that all the time. How did you manage that?
Well, look, I will say that I was always treated with respect in the Parliament. I think that certainly when I became a minister, I had just turned 33 when I became Minister for Environment and Youth, and became the youngest woman in WA political history to become a minister. So with that, it did come, I suppose, an easy opportunity for some people to criticise. And, some of the things that were said, as I said in my valedictory speech, wouldn't pass the pub test today. But as I also said in my last speech, there's a little something called resilience, and I've gained a lot of that over the years. And, I think the thing is that you have to have confidence in yourself, and sure, you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to get everything right. Everyone's human. But I think it's how you deal with that and how you actually then deal with issues that I suppose gets you through it. And certainly from my point of view, I was always a very diligent member of Parliament and a diligent minister, and I would read everything. I wanted to understand how things worked. And I think from that point of view, when I would then make decisions on issues, sometimes people would like my decisions, sometimes they wouldn't. That's the joy of being a minister. But what I could also know is that I could always stand by the decisions that I made, because I had looked at all of the available evidence. I had worked through those sorts of things and made the best decision that I felt was possible and what was needed. So that did lead to criticism on occasion, and sometimes, yes, she's too young. But you work through these things, and I had to have the confidence to say, well, actually, I can make these decisions, and I did.
And I think that's great advice for young people in any workplace, that have the confidence in yourself, but have the confidence in yourself because you do the hard yards, that you do the background work, you do the research, you do your reading, and also not to take everything personally. People who are critical are often critical because they think that they're doing their job, or they're feeling a little lacking in confidence themselves or whatever. But I think that you have to, as you say, build resilience and not take everything personally. And I think that's great advice for any young person going into a new job, or being promoted into a job, or going into politics, whether it be local, state or federal.
Yeah, and I that's sort of my philosophy in relation to that. It doesn't mean to say you always had good days. You're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. But that's the same, as you say, with any profession, any job that you go into. It's how you manage and deal with it. And recognise that some days are not going to be your best day, but some of your days are going to be your best. They are going to be your best day. So it's how you work through it, and you work hard and be diligent, and have the confidence that you can make good decisions
and treat people with the respect that you expect from them.
Yeah, and I think that's something from my point of view that is incredibly important. Always treat people fairly and with respect, and certainly from my point of view as as a now former Member of Parliament, but as a Member of Parliament, you would have robust debates on issues in Parliament. That's the nature of it. But certainly I like to think that in my 20 years, whilst I might have disagreed on occasion with members on the other side, that we always did that in a respectful way, and that I always did it in a respectful way. And I think that that's what I want to be remembered for, as someone who stood up for beliefs and advocated on issues, but did it in a way that was always respectful.
Did you have to describe that to your family at times? Because there's nothing more public than public life, but it's not their life in the public.
No, it's not. No, it's not. But, and for me, my children have grown up with me as a Member of Parliament. I mean, when I came in, I was engaged to be married. So they've gone through their early years as only knowing mum as a Member of Parliament. But, and we've always talked through issues. They've always been part of my role as a member, particularly as a local member, coming along to things with me, which has been really good. And so they've got a pretty good understanding of how it all works.
I know the way around a branch meeting.
Yeah, something like that. So it's as a Member of Parliament, your family does get drawn into your role, and it's important to make sure though that there is separation as well. And I've always tried to ensure that.
Yeah. How have you seen the media landscape change? So we talked about social media and that sort of outward push from a member to broadcast themselves. The press pack that's following you, the way in which inquiries come through, and a story is being run down by a journalist. How have you observed that changing in the 2 decades that you were an elected member?
Yeah, I suppose. I suppose the core of it remains the same. I mean, the press pack remains the same. The major paper and TV essentially remains the same. The cycle is very fast in terms of requests for information. Mm-hmm. I think that what has changed and what I touched on before in terms of that the local content has certainly decreased.
Yes.
And I think that's a sad thing. I think particularly for communities, if now you want to read about what's happening in your local community, there's very few local newspapers for people to actually pick up and read. Yeah. And, a lot of people would say, well, most people are scrolling on their phones and can look at it online.
Yeah, it's a bit of a patchwork quilt, though. You've got to kind of cobble it together.
And you've got to know where to go and who do you trust as well, because everyone's a commentator now.
Yes.
So, you've got to work through that as well. But I think there is a bit of a loss in terms of that local community side of things that people actually want to know about. They want to know what's going on in their local community. And, not everyone has access to the internet. And sometimes I think that's forgotten as well. And I think that's always a challenge. I think it's easy for people to forget that not everyone has access to information 24/7 as some other people do.
Particularly older people. And as people get older and they lose their partners and friends, they become terribly isolated. Absolutely. And those community newspapers and those community groups were their lifeblood and real connection for them. And a lot of local governments too, I think, which is really sad, used to provide outings and services for older people, and most of them have been cut now too. So it really is, sadly, I think, making many older people even more isolated. And I think that these are issues that we have to address. And again, it gets back to this ageism, whether you're really young or you're older. No, I'm just the two spectrums, Pat. The two spectrums. I'm using my hands. So.
And that would be reflective of the electorate that you represented, the East Metropolitan. Yeah. I think is probably a a really diverse mix of communities and demographics up and down the scarp.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, East Metro was the largest of the 3 upper house seats and incredibly diverse. You have areas that are very close to the city. Then you are actually heading out effectively onto the doorstep of the agricultural region. So, and within that, you've got many areas that are very much community-based, and the lovely parts of the region where you've got your Carragullen, you've got Rolleystone, you've got Kalamunda, where they are a little community, effectively not on their own, but they are very much
almost little villages.
They
aren't
are, and so they're a really key part of the region. So it's a really incredibly diverse, and really important for people within the community to have an ability to find out what's going on and to engage, much
That's
like
right.
what you say, in terms of particularly older Australians who might feel isolated and alone, and giving them the opportunity to know what's going on and where they might be able to go is really important.
Do you miss some of that community engagement? I know you did. I know personally that you did so much of it, and it might be nice to have a bit of a rest from it, but you must also miss some of that engagement with.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Very much my role as a member for East Metro Region, the work within the community was something that always made me happy, and it is a key thing that I will always look very fondly on. Being able to support community organisations, going to schools. I don't know how many schools I've visited over the years. But, my Christmas card competition that I did with students for 20 years, I mean, over 2,000 kids have participated in that competition over 20 years. When you sort of add it all up.
But that will be memories for those
Kids
children,
as
those
well.
families. They pin something on their fridge. It will.
Well,
it will stay with them.
and that's where I think things. Often people look at the really big things and go, "Oh, this is what you need to achieve and do," and they are really important, and you do that. But equally, there are other things that. Lots of things that you do within the community that actually no one else sees other than the people that you are working with, whether it's a school or a community organisation. Yeah. And when you get an outcome for them, maybe a grant application's been successful, or, you've given an award out to a school, those sorts of things where you've been part of is so rewarding, and it drove me for 20 years to do that, and I loved every minute of that job in terms of being out in the community.
But I think also in doing that, Donna, what you did was highlight part of the role of a politician, and that often I've found will engage children to get more involved and to keep more across political issues, or understand what Parliament is, understand the way Australia works in terms of local, state, and federal, the 3 tiers of government, and whatever. And I think I've spoken to many people who've said that they've become interested in politics purely because people like you have gone out to the school, had a chat, given out an award, had a competition, and that's really important because we need more engagement. Yeah. We need more engagement from younger people.
And I think the thing is, as I often will say, I mean, sometimes what people think in terms of a member of parliament is what they see on the 7 News.
That's right.
And that's normally question time. That's a key part of what people see. That's a very, very small part of actually what we do. And there is obviously the parliamentary side of things, and that is a key part. But the role within the community is something that, certainly for me, I found incredibly rewarding. Yeah.
Well, you get to pick and choose, I guess, a few more events that you want to go to in the future, which is always a good thing, in line with the liberal ethos. And on on the matters we talked about up front with regard to the child development services, that integration into schools and better coordination, better funding, I've no doubt you're going to stay very much up to date and involved driving that forward. It's an interest that transgresses portfolios and generations and demographics throughout the state.
I've just got one last question, and it's going back to the child development services. In 2023, there was statistics around wait times for psychologists and, paediatricians and whatever. They're now saying the wait time for a paediatrician has been pushed out to beyond 2 years. In your experience and your opinion, what practically can be done to just try and fix some of these things, particularly those wait times? I mean, 2 years to see a paediatrician is that's a nonsense. That's not the sort of stuff we should be experiencing here in Western Australia.
Yeah. Well, I do think, obviously funding is one, more staff. And it's not just specialist staff, it's administrative staff as well. And that's certainly what the inquiry found, that we were having specialists actually doing some work that administrative staff could do. So it was taking them away from their so we're talking a combination of stuff. Now, there has been some funding provided in that space, but it needs to be consistent, because what we found was that essentially there hadn't been a major funding increase for about 10 years. In that 10 years, there'd been a 52% increase in referrals. So you've got to have a consistent amount of funding coming through, depending on the number of referrals. And we have an amazing service we have here, I will say.
Yeah.
And so consistent funding is important. But we do need to think outside the box. There are some changes and improvements that can be made within the Department of Health in terms of integrating systems and services. Again, that was referred to in the report quite significantly. But again, there's also things that we can do, as I mentioned, with regard to speech pathology and other allied health services in schools, mobile allied health clinics. These things are not novel. These things are done in other parts of Australia and the world. At least trial them.
Absolutely.
Trial them and see if they work. I think that they will, but you've got to have the will to do it. And I think that I'd like to think that there will be the recommendations that were put forward in that inquiry will be acted upon, because there are a lot of practical initiatives and opportunities for us to do better. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us, and certainly whilst I'm not a Member of Parliament anymore, I will continue to advocate, as I've been doing today.
You know how to.
To argue that funding is one thing, but we also need to think outside the box. Think outside just the day in, day out of what we've always done, because there are other things that we can do. You just got to be prepared to do it.
Yeah. Give it a try.
Absolutely.
As you say.
Absolutely.
So let's hope that report does not sit on a shelf gathering dust, because so many of them do.
No, that's right. Thank you. We're at the end of our time and our tape, but really appreciate you coming on today, Donna. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you very much.